The studio lights burned bright, casting a warm glow over the familiar set of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their chatter filling the air as the show's theme music faded. Jimmy Kimmel, sharp in a navy suit, leaned back in his chair, his signature grin plastered across his face. Tonight's guest was Matt LeBlanc, the man who'd forever be Joey Tribbiani to millions. Though he'd carved out a new niche with his dry humor and charm on shows like Episodes. The crowd erupted as Matt walked out, his stride confident but relaxed, his smile just tight enough to hint at something unspoken. He wore a dark blazer over a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the seasoned star who'd seen it all. Jimmy stood, shaking his hand, and they settled into their seats, the audience's applause dying down. "Thanks for being here, Matt," Jimmy began, his tone light, almost too casual. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Matt nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd briefly before landing on Jimmy. "Yeah, I don't get out much these days. You know, low profile. Keep it chill." The audience chuckled, and Jimmy leaned forward, his grin widening. "Low profile? Come on, you're Matt LeBlanc. People still yell, 'How you doing?' at you in the street, don't they?" Matt's smile flickered, just for a second, but he recovered fast. "Sure, sometimes. It's flattering. You know, that show's still got legs." They bantered for a bit, the rhythm familiar, easy. Jimmy tossed softballs about Matt's recent projects, his time hosting Top Gear, his life away from the spotlight. But there was an edge to Jimmy's questions, a subtle prodding that hadn't been there in their past interviews. Matt's answers stayed polite, measured, but his fingers tapped lightly on the armrest, a small tell that went unnoticed by most. The audience laughed on cue, the show's energy high, but something simmered beneath the surface, like a pot left too long on low heat. Then Jimmy shifted gears. "So, Matt," he said, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "there's been some chatter online about you and the Friends reunion. People saying you weren't thrilled about it, maybe even pushed back on doing it. What's the real story?" There, the question landed like a jab. Matt's posture stiffened, his jaw tightening just enough to notice if you were looking for it. The audience murmured, sensing the shift. He leaned back, crossing his arms, his smile now more of a shield than a gesture. "Chatter? Who? You mean the internet doing what it does best, making stuff up?" Jimmy laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, sure, but you know how it is. Fans get curious. They want to know why Joey Tribbiani didn't get his big moment in the spotlight like the others. Was it your call, or?" The implication hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Matt's eyes narrowed, his voice staying even but colder now. "My call? You think I'm out here vetoing scripts? It was a group thing, Jimmy. We all had our reasons, and we made it work. You'd have to ask the others for their side." The audience shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter replaced by a tense hush. Jimmy didn't back off. He tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "But you're the one they're talking about, Matt. Some folks say you were, let's say less, invested, like maybe you're done with the whole Friends thing." Matt's fingers stopped tapping. He leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Jimmy's, and for a moment it felt like the cameras weren't even there. "Done with it. That show's a part of me, always will be. But I don't live in the past, and I don't owe anyone a performance of who they think I should be. You want to talk about moving on? Let's talk about why you're digging into this like it's breaking news." The crowd gasped, a few nervous laughs breaking the silence. Jimmy's grin faltered, but he recovered, leaning back with a forced chuckle. "Hey, just asking what the fans want to know, man. No need to get heated." Matt didn't respond, his stare unwavering, the air between them crackling with unspoken words. The segment wasn't over, but it felt like a line had been crossed, one neither man could unsee. The tension hung thick in the studio, a silent pulse that seemed to hold the audience captive. Matt LeBlanc's stare bore into Jimmy Kimmel, unyielding, while Jimmy's forced chuckle lingered, a weak attempt to smooth over the crack that had formed. The cameras kept rolling, the red lights steadied, but the crew exchanged quick glances, sensing the interview had veered into uncharted territory. Matt's words, sharp and deliberate, still echoed in the air, a challenge Jimmy hadn't expected. For a moment, neither man moved, the space between them a battlefield of unspoken grievances. Jimmy broke first, shifting in his chair, his grin returning but less certain now. All right, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Let's switch gears, cool things off a bit. Tell us about Top Gear. Man, that was a wild ride, right? You cars, the whole BBC thing." Matt exhaled, his posture easing slightly, but his eyes stayed guarded. He uncrossed his arms, resting one hand on the chair, his fingers resuming their subtle tap. "Yeah, Top Gear was something else. Fast cars, big stunts, a lot of fun. Got to push some limits, you know." The audience clapped, grateful for the lighter tone, but the shift felt forced, like a bandage over a fresh wound. Jimmy nodded, his enthusiasm a touch too bright. "Fun, sure, but you caught some heat over there too, didn't you? I mean, That whole controversy with the cenotaph stunt, people weren't happy. How'd you handle that backlash? Matt's jaw tightened again. The question, another needle slipped under his skin. The cenotaph incident, a misjudged stunt near a war memorial, had been a PR nightmare, one he'd weathered with apologies and time. Bringing it up now felt like a deliberate dig, a way to keep Matt on the defensive. He leaned forward, his voice low, controlled. That was a mistake, plain and simple. We apologized, made it right as best we could. You move on, learn from it. What's your point, Jimmy? The audience stirred, their murmurs louder now, a mix of discomfort and intrigue. Jimmy's smile didn't waver, but his eyes flicked to the crowd, gauging their reaction. No point, just curious. You've had a lot of these moments, haven't you, friends? Top Gear. Now the reunion stuff. Seems like you're always in the hot seat. Matt's laugh was short, bitter, cutting through the studio like a blade. Hot seat. You're the one turning up the heat, man. I came here to talk about my work, not to play dodgeball with your gotcha questions. The crowd gasped, a few cheers breaking through, emboldened by Matt's defiance. Jimmy's grin finally slipped, his face hardening for a split second before he caught himself. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, his tone shifting to something sharper. Gotcha questions. Come on, Matt, this is late-night TV. We dig a little, keep it fun. You're acting like I'm out here with a vendetta. Matt's eyes flashed, his voice steady but laced with steel. Fun for who? Jimmy, you keep poking at old wounds, dragging up stuff that's been done to death. You want to talk about my career? Fine, but this feels personal. The word landed like a grenade, the studio falling into a stunned silence. Personal it was, an accusation, raw and direct, and it hung between them, daring Jimmy to respond. The host's face froze, his usual quick wit faltering as he processed the weight of it. The audience held its breath, the air electric with anticipation. Waiting for the next move, Jimmy opened his mouth, then closed it, his fingers drumming. On the desk, finally, he spoke, his voice lower, almost conciliatory. Personal. Matt, I'm just doing my job. If it's coming off wrong, that's not my intent. Let's take a break.
Yeah.
We'll come back. Talk about something else. Matt didn't respond, his gaze still locked on Jimmy, unblinking. The director's voice crackled through the crew's headsets, calling for a commercial break. The lights dimmed slightly, the audience exhaling collectively as the show's jingle played. Matt stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and walked off the set without a word, his silhouette disappearing behind the curtains. The curtains swayed slightly as Matt LeBlanc vanished backstage, his abrupt exit leaving a void on the set. The audience's murmurs swelled, a mix of shock and excitement, their eyes darting between the empty guest chair and Jimmy Kimmel, who sat frozen at his desk. The jingle for the commercial break blared, overly cheerful against the charged atmosphere, but Jimmy's face betrayed a flicker of unease. His fingers, still drumming on the desk, slowed as he glanced toward the wings where Matt had disappeared. The red camera lights blinked off, and the crew scrambled, their hushed voices barely audible over the audience's chatter. Stagehands adjusted mics, producers huddled near the control booth, and Jimmy forced a smile, waving vaguely at the crowd as if to reassure them, or perhaps himself. Backstage, Matt moved swiftly through the narrow corridor, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The green room was just ahead, its door slightly ajar, spilling soft light into the dim hallway. He pushed it open, the hum of the air conditioning greeting him as he stepped inside. The room was small, cluttered with a couch, a coffee table, littered with water bottles, and a mirror framed by harsh bulbs. Matt's reflection stared back, his jaw still tight, his eyes dark with something between anger and resignation. He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair, the weight of the moment settling over him like dust. A knock broke the silence. Matt, it was Sarah, the segment producer, her voice cautious through the door. She stepped inside without waiting for an answer, her clipboard clutched like a shield. You okay? That got intense out there. Matt didn't look up, his gaze fixed on the floor. Intense, that's one way to put it. What's his deal? Sarah, he's out there acting like I owe him a therapy session. Sarah hesitated, glancing back at the door as if expecting someone to barge in. Jimmy's he's been under pressure. You know, ratings have been soft, the network's breathing down his neck. He probably thought pushing a little would get some buzz. Matt's laugh was sharp, humorless. Buzz. Yeah, mission accomplished. He's got his viral moment, and I'm the one looking like the bad guy. Sarah stepped closer, her voice softening. You're not the bad guy. The audience was with you, Matt. They felt it, the way he kept digging. But, we need you back out there. The segment's not done, and if you don't come back, it's all anyone's gonna talk about. Matt's eyes flicked up, meeting hers. You think I care about that? I didn't sign up to be his punching bag. He crossed a line, and I'm not playing along. Sarah nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. I get it, I do. But walking away now, that's the story they'll run with. Not Jimmy's cheap shots, not the context. Just Matt LeBlanc storms off. You want to give them that? Matt leaned back, his fingers drumming on the couch. The same restless rhythm from the set. She wasn't wrong, and he knew it. The tabloids, the X-posts, the YouTube clips, they'd feast on this, twisting it into something uglier. He'd been through it before, the way a single moment could be carved up and sold as truth. But going back out there meant facing Jimmy again, swallowing the sting of those jabs, and pretending for the cameras. Before he could answer, the door swung open. Jimmy stood there, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened. His face was stripped of the host's mask, replaced by something raw, almost apologetic. Sarah stiffened, stepping back, but Jimmy's eyes were on Matt. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quieter than it had been all night. "Just you and me. No mics, no cameras." Matt's gaze hardened, his body tensing like a coiled spring. "Talk. You had your chance out there, Jimmy. You chose ambush over conversation." Jimmy didn't flinch, but his shoulders sagged slightly. "I screwed up. Okay. I pushed too hard. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Just give me a minute to explain." The air in the green room grew heavy, the hum of the air conditioning louder in the silence. Matt's eyes stayed locked on Jimmy's, searching for something, sincerity, maybe, or a hint of the man he'd known from lighter days. The audience was waiting, the clock was ticking, and the choice hung between them, as sharp and fragile as glass. The green room felt smaller now, the air thick with the weight of Jimmy Kimmel's words hanging between them. Matt LeBlanc sat forward on the couch, his elbows on his knees, his gaze still piercing as he studied Jimmy's face. The host stood just inside the doorway, his hands stuffed in his pockets, the usual polish of his demeanor frayed at the edges. Sarah lingered near the wall, her clipboard forgotten, her eyes flicking between the two men like she was witnessing a standoff. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound for a long moment, a low drone that underscored the tension. Matt broke the silence, his voice steady but sharp. "Explain, then. You say, you didn't mean it, but you came at me like you had a score to settle. So what's the deal, Jimmy? Why turn this into a fight?" Jimmy exhaled, running a hand across the back of his neck. He stepped further into the room, letting the door swing shut behind him. "Look, Matt, I'm not gonna lie. The show's been struggling. You know how it is. Streaming's eating us alive, and the suits want clicks, headlines, anything to keep us relevant. I thought leaning into the rumors would spark something, get people talking." Matt's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping lower. "Spark something? You call that a spark? You dragged up every sore spot you could find. Friends, Top Gear, like it's a game. You think I don't know how this works. You get your moment, and I get to be the guy who overreacted." Jimmy flinched, just slightly, but enough for Matt to notice. The host took a step closer, his hands coming out of his pockets, palms up. "I didn't think it'd hit like that. I swear, Matt, I've always liked you, respected you. I got carried away, trying to make good TV. It was a bad call." Matt leaned back, his fingers stilling on the couch armrest. He studied Jimmy, searching for the crack in the apology, the hint of performance. There was none, or at least none he could see. Jimmy's face was open, his eyes tired, carrying the weight of a man who'd been fighting to keep his show afloat, in a world that didn't care about late night the way it used to. For a moment, Matt felt a pang of something like pity, but it was quickly swallowed by the sting of the earlier exchange. "So what now?" Matt asked, his tone softer but still guarded. "You want me to go back out there? Smile for the cameras. Pretend you didn't just try to gut me on live TV." Jimmy hesitated, glancing at Sarah, who gave a small nod, urging him to keep going. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to fix it," he said. "We go back. We keep it light. Talk about your new projects, whatever you want. No more cheap shots. Just you, me, and the audience having a good time." Matt's laugh was low, almost a scoff. "You think it's that easy? The crowd's already buzzing. Jimmy, they saw me walk off. They're not idiots, they know something's up. You really think we can just flip the switch and play nice?" Jimmy nodded, his voice earnest. "We can. I'll own it, Matt. I'll say I pushed too hard, set the tone right. You don't have to do anything but show up. Let me take the heat." Matt's eyes flicked to Sarah, who stood silent, her expression neutral but her grip on the clipboard tight. He could walk away now, leave the show to deal with the fallout, let the internet spin its stories. But Sarah's earlier words echoed in his mind, the warning about how this would be framed. Matt LeBlanc storms off, the headline already written. He didn't owe Jimmy anything, but he wasn't naive. He knew how the game was played, how a moment like this could define him if he let it. He stood, his movements slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving Jimmy's. "All right," he said, finally, his voice low but firm. "I'll go back. But this stays clean. Jimmy, you pull another stunt, and I'm done for good." Jimmy nodded, relief flashing across his face. "You got it? Clean slate, I promise." Sarah exhaled, stepping forward. "We've got 3 minutes before we're back on air. Let's move." She gestured toward the door, her voice brisk, professional, but her eyes held a flicker of gratitude. Matt followed her out. Jimmy, trailing behind, the corridor stretching back toward the stage where the audience waited. Their anticipation a low hum beyond the curtains. The corridor seemed shorter now, the hum of the audience growing louder with each step as Matt LeBlanc, Jimmy Kimmel, and Sarah approached the stage. The curtains loomed ahead, heavy and dark, a thin barrier between the backstage truce and the spotlight waiting beyond. Matt's face was set, his jaw tight but his eyes clear, focused, like a man walking into a fight he'd already measured. Jimmy walked beside him, his tie straightened, his posture regaining its host's confidence, though his glances at Matt carried a trace of caution. Sarah led the way, her clipboard tucked under her arm, her voice low as she murmured instructions. Into her headset, the crew parted for them, their eyes curious but professional, sensing the weight of what was coming, as they reached the edge of the stage. The jingles signaling the end of the commercial break kicked in, bright and jarring. The audience's chatter spiked, their anticipation palpable, a mix of excitement and uncertainty after Matt's earlier exit. Sarah gave Matt a quick nod, her expression steady. "You've got this," she said, then stepped back, disappearing into the shadows of the wings. Jimmy clapped Matt on the shoulder, a gesture meant to be reassuring, but Matt's slight flinch betrayed the fragile trust between them. The curtains parted, and the studio lights hit them like a wave. The audience erupted, their applause louder than before, tinged with something raw, as if they sensed the drama unfolding. Jimmy strode to his desk, waving at the crowd, his grin back in place but tempered, less cocky. Matt followed, his stride deliberate, his face neutral but not cold. He settled into the guest chair, the same one he'd left minutes ago, and the crowd's cheers softened, waiting for what would come next. Jimmy leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk, his voice warm but careful. "Welcome back, everybody. Matt LeBlanc's still here, and I'm grateful for that." The audience laughed lightly, a few claps breaking through. Jimmy's eyes met Matt's, a silent acknowledgement. "I gotta say, Matt, I got a little carried away earlier, pushed too hard on some stuff that didn't need pushing. That's on me. So let's hit reset, have some fun, and talk about what you're up to now." The crowd applauded, louder this time, their relief audible. Matt's lips curved into a small, guarded smile, his posture easing just enough to signal he was willing to play along. "Reset sounds good," he said, his voice steady, drawing a few cheers. "Let's talk about something that doesn't involve ancient history." Jimmy nodded, his laugh genuine, or at least close enough. "Deal. So, you've been working on some new stuff, right? I heard you're producing now, getting behind the camera. What's that like?" Matt leaned back, his fingers resting on the armrest, no longer tapping. "It's different, man. Acting's one thing, but producing, you're in the trenches, making calls, solving problems. I like it though. Keeps me sharp, lets me tell stories without being in front of the lens all the time." The conversation flowed easier now, the earlier tension not gone but buried beneath the rhythm of a practiced interview. Jimmy stuck to safe ground, asking about Matt's latest project, a dark comedy series he was producing. And Matt's answers were thoughtful, laced with the dry humor that had always been his trademark. The audience laughed on cue, their energy lifting, the show regaining its familiar groove. But there was a fragility to it, a sense that the piece was temporary, held together by mutual restraint. That then, midway through a story about a chaotic day on set, Jimmy's tone shifted, just slightly. "Sounds like you're loving the producing gig," he said, his grin widening. "But come on, Matt, you ever miss the old days? You know, running lines with the Friends cast, stealing sandwiches from craft services." The question was light, almost nostalgic, but it landed like a stone in still water. Matt's smile flickered, his eyes locking onto Jimmy's, searching for intent. The audience chuckled, unaware of the undercurrent, but the air between the two men tightened again. Matt's voice stayed even, but there was an edge to it. "Sure, I miss parts of it. Great times, great people. But like I said, I don't live in the past. You keep asking about it, though. Why's that?" Jimmy's grin held, but his eyes betrayed a flash of unease, the truce teetering on the edge of breaking once more. The studio lights seemed to sharpen, pinning Matt LeBlanc and Jimmy Kimmel in their glow as the audience's laughter faded into an expectant hush. Matt's question hung in the air, his voice calm but pointed, cutting through the veneer of the reset they'd agreed upon. Jimmy's grin, so carefully maintained, wavered just enough to betray the misstep. He leaned back in his chair, his hands spreading on the desk, a gesture meant to reclaim control. The crowd sensed the shift, their murmurs soft but charged, like static before a storm. Matt's eyes stayed fixed on Jimmy, unwavering, waiting for an answer that could either mend the fracture or shatter it completely. Jimmy exhaled, his chuckle forced but quick, a host's reflex. "Why? Hey, I'm just giving the people what they want, Matt. Friends is a legend. You're a legend. Fans love that stuff." He turned to the audience, gesturing broadly. "Right, folks, you want to hear about Joey Tribbiani." The crowd cheered, some clapping, others shouting, "How you doing?" in a playful echo of the past. But the enthusiasm felt hollow, a reflex rather than genuine, and Matt's expression didn't soften. He leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate, cutting through the noise. Fans want a lot of things. Jimmy, doesn't mean you keep dragging me back to a show that ended years ago. I'm here. I'm talking about what I'm doing now. Why's that not enough? The audience's cheers quieted, the weight of Matt's words settling over the room. Jimmy's smile tightened, his fingers twitching on the desk. He opened his mouth, then closed it, caught off guard by the directness. The crew in the wings stood still, Sarah's silhouette visible, her eyes wide but unreadable. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the unraveling truce. Jimmy recovered, his voice softer now, almost conciliatory. You're right, man, I keep circling back, and that's not fair. Let's stay in the present. Your new show, the producing, that's the real story here. Tell us more about it. What's got you excited? Matt studied him for a long moment, his gaze searching for sincerity. Finally, he nodded, just once, and leaned back, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. All right, the show's called Last Call, dark comedy. Like I mentioned, it's about a guy running a bar that's falling apart. But it's really about second chances, figuring out who you are when the world's moved on. Feels real to me. The audience clapped, their energy lifting, grateful for the pivot. Jimmy seized the moment, his grin returning, more genuine now. That sounds like something I'd watch. You're out here telling stories that hit deep. Any chance we'll see you pop up on screen in this one? Matt's smile was small, cautious, but real. Maybe. I'm focused on the producing side. But you never know. I don't like to close doors. The conversation found its rhythm again. Matt talking about the challenges of producing. The late nights, the fights over budgets. Jimmy listened, nodding, his questions sharp but respectful, staying firmly in the present. The audience laughed at Matt's dry anecdotes, the earlier friction fading into the background, though not forgotten. The show felt alive again. The chemistry between the two men, fragile but holding as the segment neared its end. Jimmy leaned forward, his tone earnest. Matt, I gotta say, it's been great having you here. Even with the bumps, you're doing incredible stuff, and I'm glad you stuck it out tonight. Matt nodded, his expression softer now, though his eyes still carried a trace of wariness. Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Let's just say it's been memorable. The audience laughed, their applause swelling as Jimmy stood, extending a hand. Matt rose, shaking it firmly, the gesture brief but deliberate. The cameras panned out, the jingle kicked in, and the show cut to commercial. As the lights dimmed, Matt glanced at the crowd, their cheers washing over him, then turned and walked off stage, his silhouette steady against the closing curtains. Backstage, Sarah met him with a relieved smile. You handled that like a pro, she said, her voice low. Matt just nodded, his face unreadable, and kept walking, the weight of the night settling into his bones as the studio's noise faded behind him.